Chapter 1: The Unseen Opponent. The night was cold, a biting chill that seemed to creep through the cracks of the old wooden bleachers at Blackwood High School soccer field. The stadium lights, struggling against the encroaching darkness, cast long, distorted shadows across the grass, painting the scene with an eerie glow. It was an ordinary Friday night game, the final match of the season, and the bleachers were packed with enthusiastic fans. The home team, Blackwood High's Tigers, were facing off against their rivals, the Crestwood Eagles. Coach Daniels paced nervously along the sidelines, his eyes flicking from the scoreboard to the field. The Tigers were down by 1 goal, and with only 10 minutes left, the tension was palpable. Despite his attempts to stay focused, Daniels couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, an uneasy sensation that seemed to grow with each passing minute. The players were giving their all, their breaths forming visible puffs in the freezing air. Among them was Matt Carter, a talented forward who had always dreamed of making a game-winning goal. Tonight, however, the weight of the game seemed heavier than ever. As he sprinted down the field, he felt an inexplicable chill, as if something, or someone, was following him. The ball soared toward the goal, and Matt, with a fierce determination, leapt to strike. But as his foot connected, the world seemed to pause. The stadium lights flickered erratically, and an unsettling silence enveloped the field. Matt's shot was intercepted by an unseen force, sending the ball spinning off course. Confused murmurs swept through the crowd, and the players exchanged uneasy glances. "Something's not right," Matt thought, his breath misting in the cold air. He glanced toward the darkened corner of the field where a shadow seemed to linger. Chapter 2: The Haunting Whistle. With only minutes left on the clock, the Tigers pressed on, desperate to equalize. The cold seemed to deepen, and a strange, almost otherworldly fog began to rise from the ground, swirling around the players and obscuring their vision. As the fog thickened, so did the oppressive silence. A piercing whistle cut through the fog, startling everyone. It was a sound that didn't belong, harsh and discordant, like nails on a chalkboard. The referee, a burly man with a bushy beard, looked around in confusion. He had heard nothing out of the ordinary before the game, but now he too was unnerved. The players halted, their breaths forming ghostly wisps in the chill. Matt glanced toward the center of the field, where the whistle seemed to have originated. There, in the midst of the fog, stood a lone figure. The figure was clad in old-fashioned soccer gear, with a face obscured by a hooded cloak. The figure held a whistle in one hand and a soccer ball in the other. As the figure blew the whistle again, the fog seemed to close in tighter, and an eerie moan echoed through the field. The players stumbled, disoriented, as shadows danced along the edge of the fog. The scoreboard flickered ominously, its numbers jumping erratically. The figure's eyes glowed faintly from within the hood, and a cold, unnatural wind swept across the field. The Tigers, now visibly frightened, huddled together. Coach Daniels, trying to maintain control, called for a timeout. But as he approached the figure, he found himself inexplicably drawn toward it, unable to look away from the glowing eyes. Chapter 3: The Phantom Goalkeeper. As the game resumed, the atmosphere was thick with fear. The fog seemed to have a life of its own, writhing and shifting with each gust of wind. The Tigers, though terrified, knew they had to focus. Their goal was to overcome the supernatural terror and win the game. Matt, still haunted by the shadowy figure, found himself in a frantic race with the ball. The fog made it nearly impossible to see, but he could feel something, an unseen presence, guarding the goal. The Tigers' attempts to score were thwarted by an unseen force, a spectral goalkeeper who seemed to anticipate their every move. The phantom goalkeeper was swift and ruthless, its movements eerily synchronized with the players' actions. It deflected shots with ghostly precision, its form barely visible through the fog. The players tried to communicate, shouting over the roar of the crowd and the howling wind, but their voices were swallowed by the oppressive silence. Matt, determined to break through, took a deep breath and charged toward the goal. The phantom goalkeeper seemed to materialize out of the fog, its eyes glowing with malevolent intent. As Matt prepared to shoot, he felt a cold, spectral hand graze his arm, and the ball was inexplicably knocked away. Desperation set in as the Tigers realized that they were not just facing a rival team but an entity from beyond. The final whistle was fast approaching, and the team's chances of victory seemed to slip away with each passing second. Chapter 4: The Final Confrontation. The fog grew denser, and the atmosphere became almost suffocating. The Tigers, exhausted and terrified, regrouped on the field. The players huddled together, their breaths coming in ragged gasps, as they faced the spectral presence that loomed over them. Coach Daniels, still entranced by the figure, struggled to break free from its influence. He felt a cold, ghostly hand on his shoulder, and a voice, whispering in a language he didn't understand, echoed in his ears. The figure's eyes burned with an ancient rage, and Daniels knew he had to confront it directly. Matt, driven by a mixture of fear and determination, approached the figure. "What do you want?" he shouted into the fog. "Why are you doing this?" The figure's voice, hollow and echoing, replied, "Victory. For those who lost. I seek retribution." Suddenly, the fog lifted slightly, revealing a ghostly soccer team, the spirits of players who had once competed on this very field, their faces twisted in anguish. The phantom goalkeeper stepped forward, its form solidifying into that of a long-forgotten rival, its eyes filled with sorrow and rage. Matt realized the truth. These were the spirits of players who had perished in a tragic accident during a game many years ago. Their souls were trapped, unable to find peace. The game was their way of seeking retribution, their final chance to win the victory that had been stolen from them. Chapter 5: The Final Whistle. In a desperate bid to end the haunting, Matt and Coach Daniels made a bold decision. They gathered the Tigers and, with a unified effort, approached the phantom team. They played with a fervor they had never felt before, their every move fueled by a desire to bring closure to the restless spirits. The game reached its climax as the final whistle approached. With a last, determined push, Matt managed to score a goal that seemed to resonate with the very fabric of the field. The phantom team, their expression softening, accepted the outcome. The fog began to dissipate, and the spectral presence lifted. As the final whistle blew, signaling the end of the game, the spirits of the phantom team faded into the night, their forms dissolving into the gentle glow of the moonlight. The fog lifted completely, and the stadium lights shone brightly once more. The Tigers stood on the field, exhausted but victorious. The haunting presence had vanished, leaving only the echoes of the final whistle in its wake. The scoreboard, once flickering, now displayed a final, clear score: Tigers 2, Eagles 1. The players and Coach Daniels looked around, relieved but shaken. The game had ended, and the specter of the haunted field had been laid to rest. The night was still cold, but the fear that had gripped them had receded, replaced by a profound sense of closure. As the team left the field, they knew they had faced something beyond their understanding. The story of that fateful game would become a legend, a chilling reminder of the night when the final whistle had bridged the gap between the living and the dead.